what are your plans? Ooh, I already like this one. What are your plans for when your baby comes? Will you be taking time off or still working? What about your husband? This is the question that has driven so much for me. I think this year and even from the very beginning. So I mentioned earlier that we got married the very first year of our business in Mexico. And we had already set our wedding date when we started the company, and it kept me up at night because I was picturing myself on my wedding day sitting there working. I didn't know how I was going to take a single day off. And I don't know if I might have taken a couple of days off before the wedding. So we went live January 1st, 2010, got married November 12th, 2010. So this was step one. What we did was we were forced, once we got to the point where we were comfortable hiring, we hired our first part-time employee in April of 2010. And immediately jumped in to start training because even early on, I remember same thing, keeping me up at night. I remember just laying there looking at the ceiling and I said, is this my life forever? It was really stressful. The early days can be very stressful, and you have to know that it gets better. It truly gets better and the balance gets better, but you do typically have to put in some really hard work early on. Once we were able to hire some help and really get to a point where we were confident. And she was wonderful. We were really lucky that we were able to find somebody and here's another thing. So she was wonderful. When we went to hire, we only had the budget for a part-time hire. And so I thought to myself, because like I said, my career path that I was told was you go to school, you graduate from college, you get a full-time job, and you work your way up the ladder. And I said, okay, this is a professional level job. We need somebody who is professional and experienced, and maybe not experienced, but who can be trained, who has a college degree, and is willing to work half part-time. How are we ever going to find somebody who fits this demand? Everyone wants full-time jobs. Well, it turned out I learned a really interesting lesson in that hire. We had 100 and we kind of just did the job posting at this time. This is before we kind of realized that you should really, again, go through relationships and look for recommendations for hires. We had 110 or so applications, and everyone had a different story. Everyone had a different reason that they wanted to work part-time. We had some people who were going back to school part-time. They wanted to do grad school part-time. We had some people who had children and wanted to spend more time with their children, but they were very professional level people, very qualified people who just didn't have the desire to work full-time. They really, ideally, for their lifestyle, they wanted something part-time. And what we ended up finding was somebody who actually had another part-time job that was flexible and had started it in another state. I had moved to Chicago, and they liked her so much they kept her. It had been full-time. They liked her so much they kept her on part-time, and she had this other half to fill. And so she basically took 2 part-time jobs and made it into a full-time job. And I never even thought that was a possibility. We just learn about these traditional careers. Or maybe you have somebody who is running their own business part-time, but they need to fill in the income, but so many reasons that people don't want to work full-time. And so we were lucky enough to find her and train her and get her in there. And I know I'm kind of going on and on, but I think this is all important in terms of the story and really important lessons learned within the business. So over the years, she ended up becoming full-time. We ended up hiring other kind of contractors who would lead into employees and so forth. And this year, I knew that this was going to be probably my biggest test in terms of taking time off, because we went to Europe in when did we go? In June. And so that was kind of the first test, taking a couple of weeks to go to Europe and still maybe checking in here and there, but realizing, okay, this business is really running smoothly without us. And then I ended up hiring somebody else, another part-time, another case where it's just the perfect story where now we know this kind of works, another part-time person who could fill in enough and help the team enough to make everything run smoothly without me there. And so every single time that we've, I think, made a really important hire, and it's just been really good for us for the business and in getting me out of those things that I shouldn't be doing anyway, because they're very much in the weeds day to day and I shouldn't even be focusing on. It was probably distracting me and taking too much of my time anyway. And every time that I've been forced, because I absolutely have no choice, I cannot just say that I'm going to work. I'm not going to have a baby and just say I'm going to work. And I don't want to do that. So by being forced to hire and being forced to bring other people in, it's actually always been the right step. So being forced to do it, but taking time ahead of time, planning ahead, bringing people in. And then we use that course route system where we just record. I literally took everything in my brain and I used Camtasia and I screen recorded all of my processes. I sat down with a notebook. I wrote down every single process that I possibly have that could be in my head, that should not only be in my head, because let's say something happens to me even, it shouldn't be there. It needs to be out. It needs to be out and the team needs to know. I wrote down every single process. We went to Camtasia. We recorded all of these videos. We created PDF guides that are attached to each video. We created notes under each video. And through CourseRoute, we really just use that as a resource. So when we brought in new people to train, or even people who are already on the team, they can go to that and they don't have to come to me every single time. That is all there for them. And so it's actually been helpful for me too, because I've had people record the videos and I can check them, or I can check my own things and make sure, okay, let's make sure my processes are consistent. So it's been really good for keeping the processes set and for allowing other people to take that on. So I think training, getting it out of your brain and planning ahead, and sometimes just being forced to take that next step and bring someone else in who can help you out, even if it's just temporary. There's always, the world is very large. There are people with so many different stories. You really never know who's out there and what needs they might have. Okay, let's go to the next question. Question is, what